This amazing story begins with a major battle where the US military arrives to help their allies. The US soldiers are trying their best to eliminate the enemy as quickly as possible and return because the number of enemies has increased drastically. Now we see a US military soldier who, in an attempt to save his life, takes shelter inside a compartment. He is searching for his fellow soldiers who had arrived there, severely injured. These soldiers had access to advanced technologies. One of them was wearing special goggles that could detect movement and any nearby presence. As he looks around using those goggles, he suddenly hears faint noises. As soon as he approaches the source of the sound, unexpected movement begins, as if an invisible entity is advancing toward him. The soldier is unable to do anything to protect himself, and suddenly, the unknown, invisible force attacks him. Within moments, the soldier is killed. But what exactly was that mysterious and invisible entity? No one has any idea. However, one thing is certain: the footage of whatever the soldier saw through his goggles was transmitted to the headquarters. Now, on the other side, we are introduced to a scientist named Kling, who is explaining a laser beam reaction to the US military officers. This laser beam was his own invention, capable of melting frozen ice instantly, and if used on water, it could turn it back into ice. In other words, it had great potential for military applications. However, the officers suggest that Kling should test it on humans. For now, Kling had not designed it for use on people, but he considers the possibility for the future. Soon after, a US military team, including Kling, is transferred to the same location where the massive battle had taken place. The infrastructure in that area has suffered severe damage, and many officers are still trapped inside. Kling has been brought here to conduct experiments on some strange occurrences. Following all protocols, Kling reports directly to an officer named Freya. She explains everything to him, making it clear that he will be working under the government forces. She also makes him sign a document stating that whatever he sees or experiences here must remain classified. He is strictly forbidden from revealing anything to the outside world, as all these matters are considered top secret. Kling accepted these conditions, so Freya took him to her senior officer. The senior officer showed Kling the video footage recorded by the soldier before his death. They couldn't understand what this invisible entity was that was rapidly killing their soldiers. Freya suspected that it might be some kind of advanced technology used by their enemies to attack while remaining invisible. However, Kling disagreed. He didn't believe that their enemies had such advanced technology. He thought it could be something else entirely. To find out the truth, they would have to observe it up close. Fortunately, Kling had brought a highly advanced camera with him. He explained that he would use this camera during the battle to record footage of the mysterious entity. The senior officer agreed to Kling's plan. Kling then mounted the camera onto a military tank, hoping that it would capture everything clearly. The soldiers and officers present there found Kling's actions amusing and even made fun of him, but the senior officer quickly silenced them, reminding them that most of the weapons they used were invented by Kling. He emphasized that they should respect his inventions. Understanding this, the soldiers stopped mocking Kling and started supporting him instead. Now, the captain gathered all the soldiers and explained their plan of execution. They had to enter the battlefield strategically to rescue their wounded and trapped comrades, as their survival was just as crucial as their own. As for the mysterious entities, whom everyone had started calling ghosts, they would fight them together, with Kling playing a crucial role in gathering as much information as possible. This knowledge would help them devise a way to defeat these unknown entities in the future. Everyone understood the plan well and agreed to execute it. Kling and Freya joined the team as they set out on their dangerous mission. To enhance his investigation, Kling even installed cameras on each soldier's helmet, allowing him to monitor their movements in real time. He was following a well-planned approach to uncover the truth about the mysterious entity. The entire team, equipped with massive tanks, arrived at the same location where numerous soldiers had gone before but never returned. With their weapons ready, the soldiers cautiously advanced inside, while Kling and Freya remained inside a truck, monitoring the camera feeds. Some soldiers moved upwards, while others stayed on the lower level. They could clearly see that many of their fellow soldiers had been brutally killed. However, what shocked them the most was that the bodies showed no visible wounds or injuries. It was as if the entity had directly stopped their hearts, killing them instantly. As the team moved further, Kling suddenly noticed something unusual. He pointed out that something was glowing beneath the bathtub. When the soldiers removed the bathtub, they discovered another soldier hidden underneath. It was someone from the previous team. He was the only survivor. The soldier was terrified and muttered, "Everyone else is dead. But when I hid inside the bathtub, that thing didn't attack me." He was too frightened to say anything more. The team immediately rescued him and evacuated him from the site. Meanwhile, the soldiers on the upper level continued their exploration. Suddenly, Kling noticed strange movements on the cameras and immediately warned them, "That unknown entity is right in front of you." The soldiers quickly took defensive positions and started firing at the invisible force. However, their bullets had absolutely no effect on it. One by one, the entity started killing them. Kling was utterly shocked by what he was witnessing. Realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, he urgently commanded the soldiers to retreat. However, some of them hesitated, unwilling to abandon their positions. But before they could react further, the invisible entity launched an attack on them, striking them down instantly. To kill a soldier, several soldiers were descending from a building using ropes, but those dangerous creatures could also climb the building in the same way and kept killing people. Kling was observing those strange creatures through the advanced camera mounted on his truck. And when he saw them in such detailed view, he was shocked because he had never experienced such things in his life. Those unknown and dangerous creatures seemed like they belonged to an advanced civilization that was attacking humans. For now, research on them could be done later, but they needed to save their lives first. That's why Kling decided to drive away from there with the truck. Kling had kept the surviving soldiers inside his truck, and he started asking them, "What exactly did you see there?" The soldier definitely knew something, but just as he was about to say something, a small blast suddenly occurred in their truck. The blast was quite large, causing the truck to fall, and in this entire accident, the surviving soldier lost his life. This meant that the information Kling wanted to know would now never be revealed to him. Since the truck was damaged and they couldn't travel that way, everyone got out. Kling had also taken his advanced camera with him, and after that, he was heading toward a large chamber with the remaining soldiers, thinking that this place would be safe for all of them. For now, the other soldiers were scared because half of their team had already been killed. They were afraid that those unknown creatures might attack them as well, since they still hadn't figured out how to fight these strange beings. Neither bullets nor any other weapons had any effect on them. It felt like something out of a science fiction movie, where humans were completely powerless in front of aliens. Kling had brought his advanced camera for this very reason, so they could detect from a distance if those creatures were approaching them. Priya was also very shocked after discovering these unknown creatures, so Kling was reassuring her that everything would be fine. The soldiers were also trying to contact their base camp, but they couldn't establish a connection. If things continued like this, those unknown creatures would keep killing them one by one. By now, every soldier's camera had been completely destroyed, which they could have used to see those creatures from the unknown civilization. But at that moment, Kling took out his advanced camera so they could easily see the creatures. All the soldiers, along with Kling, started looking through the camera to see how those creatures were advancing toward them. After continuously observing in this manner, Kling also noticed that the creatures were unable to move past a certain point. There were some unknown metal objects on the ground that the creatures couldn't cross. It seemed like they might be experiencing pain from it, and Kling wanted to learn more about this. Slowly, he started his investigation. While all the soldiers were exploring the area, they suddenly spotted two children. The two children were very scared and were hiding in a corner. Priya was talking to them calmly, trying to gather some information. The children told Priya that their father had created these metal circles. This meant that the father of these two children knew about these creatures and likely knew their weakness as well. But at that moment, no one had any idea where he was. For now, Priya took the two children with her because their lives could also be in danger. Sometime later, we are shown a general who was directly connecting with them from the headquarters. The general decided to send several helicopters to help the trapped soldiers. but they would have to come a certain distance away from their location so that the rescue could be carried out properly. However, this was the biggest challenge because those unknown creatures were roaming all around. If the creatures spotted any humans, they would kill them in a very brutal way. The soldiers were happy because they were being rescued, but the biggest problem was how they would reach that spot. Kling was thinking about what those metal pieces were that the creatures couldn't cross. When Kling examined those metal pieces, he got an idea that they could use them to make weapons, because it was possible that these creatures became very weak when exposed to these metals. Kling even used his advanced camera to create a laser beam that could detect those invisible creatures. After a lot of hard work, Kling finally succeeded in making that device, and it was working well. This meant that now they just needed to make a good plan to escape from there while killing those creatures, because the invisible creatures would definitely come toward them after hearing the sound of human footsteps. The next morning, as they executed the plan they had made, they moved forward. With the help of the laser beam created by Kling, they could easily see the invisible creatures, which allowed the soldiers to track their locations. At the same time, the invisible creatures that were advancing to attack them, they were slowing down the creatures with the help of the weapons they had made. These creatures didn't die from this, but they became very weak. And because of this entire process, all the soldiers started moving forward, saving their lives. However, some soldiers were killed by the creatures, but most of the soldiers survived and began heading toward their rescue location. All the soldiers and Kling were, for now, moving toward the rescue location where military tanks and helicopters were supposed to arrive. But suddenly, in the middle of this, Kling's laser beam malfunctioned, so they could no longer see the invisible creatures. This meant their entire team was now in great danger. At that location, a military tank had already arrived, which was equipped with the same type of laser beams. The soldier controlling the laser beam noticed that several of those creatures were present near a building, possibly preparing to attack. So, they used the tank to continuously fire and destroy the entire structure. It didn't seem like the explosion would affect the creatures much. They were not only invisible but also very transparent, allowing them to pass through anything. The creatures got a good opportunity and started killing the soldiers one by one. One of the two small children, a little boy, got lost there and started heading toward the middle. Kling and the boy's younger sister went to save him, but the invisible creatures had already killed the child. Kling felt terrible about this entire process and couldn't bear the fact that such a small child had died. Shortly after, a military helicopter arrived to rescue them. Several creatures advanced toward them, but the wind from the helicopter forced them to retreat. To prevent the creatures from damaging the helicopter, Kling scattered all the metal pieces around. Any invisible creatures that came into contact with those metal pieces would get severely injured and retreat, which gave them a good opportunity to board the helicopter. Kling, along with the little girl Priya and several soldiers, boarded the helicopter, which was now flying far away from there. From above, they could see the horrific scene of how those creatures were causing destruction everywhere. Their numbers had increased compared to before. The helicopter pilot said that their base camp had been completely destroyed. So instead of going there, they were heading to a rescuer's area where the rest of the humans had been kept safe. After landing at the base camp, everyone went inside. The little girl was severely injured and very depressed because of her brother's death. However, when Priya asked her what her father used to do, the girl clearly told her that her father worked in a container factory. This was a container factory where a large power plant was located, and the enemies who were initially fighting the US military also belonged to that same place. Hearing these things, Kling started to suspect that the origin of all these creatures might be from there. To find out more about this, he would need to go there and conduct a detailed investigation because these creatures couldn't be killed in this manner. After some time, the general also arrived there. When he learned that the soldiers of his entire team had been killed, he became very disappointed. These soldiers were like family to him, and they had left him in this way. The general couldn't understand how to kill these creatures. At that moment, Kling had figured out some things, so he explained to the other soldiers that, according to him, these creatures were made from the fifth form of an element, a type of element that doesn't yet exist on Earth. This element could only be created by subjecting it to very low temperatures, because at low temperatures, no substance remains in its real form. This was the reason that if these creatures touched a human body, all the internal parts of that person would instantly freeze. That's why no injury marks were found on the bodies of the victims, because they had already died from the inside due to the low temperature. However, Kling had already discovered one weakness. These creatures slowed down significantly when exposed to metal. If they used this weakness, they could be killed. To investigate this further, Kling sought permission from the general to go to that power plant, as everything had started from there. Kriya provided all the information about the power plant, how power generation had been happening there for many years, and what kinds of experiments were being conducted, which no one had any idea about. This meant they now had a complete plan ready. Kling also asked the soldiers for their weapons because he wanted to install plasma cannons in their guns. The plasma cannon was a fourth part of the element, with the help of which even those at very low temperatures could be harmed. Everyone had faith in Kling, which is why he was given permission. After a lot of hard work, Kling finally succeeded in making that weapon. Within a short time, he started heading toward the power plant with a large team of soldiers. This time, if they failed, no one would be able to save them from dying. All the soldiers were equipped with the plasma cannons made by Kling. As soon as they reached the power plant, a creature was standing in front of them. The soldiers attacked the creature with the help of the plasma cannon. A massive blast occurred there, and the creature was destroyed on the spot. This meant that the plasma cannon created by Kling was indeed working well. Kling, the general, and Kriya, along with their companions, had also arrived at the power plant and were trying to enter it, while the other soldiers were busy fighting the creatures. Kling and Kriya were being covered by the soldiers so they could go inside and conduct their investigation. The two of them kept moving forward and eventually reached the experimental section. This was the same chamber where those creatures were being created. There were small creatures there that were still in the process of forming and would be ready to come out in some time. They were seeing such unique things for the first time in their lives, but they couldn't understand why any country would create something that was dangerous for its own people. Kling noticed that the nervous system of all these creatures was connected to a machine. If they shut down that generation machine, all of these creatures could be eliminated. So, Kling started looking for the central unit of that machine, which, once turned off, would fix everything. Meanwhile, up above, the other soldiers were killing the creatures, but now the invisible creatures had figured things out. They started coming in larger numbers, combining with each other, and their size increased significantly. The soldiers fired at them, but now their plasma cannons had no effect on them. After increasing their size, the creatures began killing the soldiers one by one. Due to their increased size, the structures of the building started collapsing. The research center where Kling and Priya were present also had its chambers breaking apart. Some creatures were already forming and coming out, which Priya was helping to kill. It seemed as though all the humans would now be killed, but Kling managed to find the central unit under any circumstances and disconnected it from the main system. As a result, the creatures that were forming couldn't get energy properly, and their entire bodies became completely paralyzed. All the creatures forming in the research center were killed, and for the time being, everyone's lives were saved. However, the mission wasn't over yet. They still had to kill the numerous creatures that had spread throughout the city. Priya and Kling went deeper into the chamber for further investigation. Kling and Priya saw something very shocking there because human nervous systems were present at that place, and by incorporating small machines into these nervous systems, they were being converted into those creatures. In this way, thousands of experiments were being conducted simultaneously. When Kling gathered information about the human nervous systems being used there, he found out that they were all clones, meaning they weren't actual humans. Because if actual humans were preserved at such low temperatures, they would die immediately. That's why using their clones was considered the best method. The truth was that there were certain organizations that wanted to create these creatures to use against their enemies, but something went wrong in that experiment. All these creatures went out of control and started attacking the very people who created them, which forced them to shut down the experiment immediately. However, the creatures that were in the final production stage were left as they were. Kling and Priya realized that these creatures could only be killed if their energy consumption was completely stopped. For now, they knew how to kill the individual creatures, and together they would kill the creatures that had spread throughout the city. At that moment, Kriya and Kling worked together to disconnect all the energy consumption, which caused the nervous systems in the chamber to deactivate completely. This meant that those invisible creatures would never be created again. Both of them felt that human civilization could finally be saved, and our story ends here in this way.